What does it take to master character design? Welcome to the Mo Method, a show where we talk to creatives who have turned their passions into professions. Today's episode is with Paul Deasy, an incredible 3D artist and character designer. Paul's journey from 2D animation to creating amazing 3D characters is full of lessons of persistence, leveraging tools such as ZBrush and Unreal Engine, and building a successful career in an ever-evolving digital landscape. We'll touch upon AI's role in art, the power of community, and how Paul defines success. If you haven't already, please subscribe and let's get into it.
Hi, my name is Paul Deasy. I'm a character artist from Dublin.
So let's start from the beginning. How'd you get into character art? Did you go to school or you're self-taught?
I went to Ballyfermot College, which is a college in Dublin that teaches classical and computer animation, and that's what I did there. I did like a portfolio course there, but it wasn't about characters. It was just animation, drawing, painting, just the general stuff.
So like 2D animation,
2D and 3D, yeah. Not actually. Well, in the portfolio course, it was just 2D, and then from the portfolio course went into the classical and computer animation, and then we got into 3D. But even then, like ZBrush was a thing at that stage, but they didn't teach it. They were still kind of teaching a very old school way about doing things. So it was very simple box modeling. I vaguely remember doing some UVs and then just animating a very simple character.
What programs were you using?
Max.
Okay.
3ds Max. And that was it. And then everything else was, then we did 2D animation, and we were doing layout design for like 2D movies, and then life drawing, the usual kind of stuff, visual development class, that kind of stuff.
Was animation, was that your initial interest?
Not to be an animator, but to get into animation, yeah. I was much more, actually, I would say, going through college, my interest, layout was my favorite class in college, and that was the one that I kind of put a lot of most of my focus in. So it was actually 2D backgrounds was what I was kind of
interesting
heading towards, and then I
you went to 3D characters. That's like the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I maybe I would have got into 3D characters earlier if, like I said, they were teaching ZBrush, because it was, to me, I wanted. I was a lot younger, and I thought, I don't want to deal with the technical stuff. I just want to be an artist, and I want to pencil and paper and stuff, and thinking that I just want to be pure that way, and then
a romantic.
Yeah, exactly. And then actually after college, the typical finished college, can't get a job, that old chestnut, and a friend of mine told me to try ZBrush. And he had already been in the industry a bit. He was a bit older than me, and so I got a trial version of ZBrush, and I tried it out and immediately loved it. I loved clay sculpting when we did it in college. That was like, sometimes we used clay. We do life drawing with clay, and I always really enjoyed it. It was always like a nice treat when you come in, you see all the clay laid out, you're like, nice. So it kind of, as soon as I picked up ZBrush, it made me feel that same kind of way. And I think from the moment he told me to use ZBrush, I started using it, continued to, I immediately just started making characters. I had a whole portfolio of 2D backgrounds and paintings even. It's at that early stage where you're trying to just do everything in the hopes that someone will hire you, kind of that classic mistake. And within 7 months, I think it was, all I did was just sit in front of ZBrush. I completely replaced that whole 2D portfolio with 3D characters, and then got my first job as a character modeler in a studio in Dublin called Brownback.
Are you making characters for animation, or what's kind of the use case for your characters?
Well, throughout my career, most of it has been for animation.
Mm-hmm.
I work in a game studio now, called Disruptive Games, and and over the years I do freelance here and there for games. So I was much more familiar with like the 3D pipeline for animation, but I was I had a general knowledge of the game side of it as well, and would dip into that. And now, obviously, now I'm fully working for a game studio, so
Yeah.
uh, I've made the switch over, which
What
I'm
what do, what do you like better, animation or games?
so I always thought I'd like animation better because I think I kind of thought, well, I guess at the time there was more truth to it. Like I thought there was more detail, more fidelity, more, an animated character could be
Mm-hmm.
essentially higher resolution.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where, and I love games. I've always played games, but in terms of just the artistic side of it, I thought animation would be better for me. Because
Mm-hmm.
I want to like, I don't want to be held back by, numbers of tries and all this kind of stuff. So, and I think in Dublin, there's just more animation work.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much game. Well, there's more now, but at the time there wasn't much. So, but that said, now that I'm in games, I wish I had just started in games because it just suits me
Interesting.
better. I love games. I love, sitting with the team and discussing systems and, does this enemy work well for the player? Is it obvious, like figuring out these
Yeah.
problems? I really enjoy that as well as making the characters.
So
So
you get to kind of be involved in the development as well as the character design. You're not just doing the design.
yeah, yeah, I think that which suits me. Um, it's a smaller studio, so things that got like there's pros and cons to whether you're working in like a massive studio or something an indie studio kind of thing.
Right.
I think that suits me. A smaller studio suits me more because I just like the more personal feel to knowing everyone that works there and chatting and having back and forth with everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a nice change of pace too because with a bigger studio, you mightn't really get any say in like the gameplay.
Right.
You're
Right.
just given tasks and that's your job and you just keep doing that. You're kind of not involved in those meetings that are about gameplay and stuff like that. So,
Right.
uh, but again, pros and cons.
Yeah. What was your kind of first like introduction to design and art before college? Were you doing it already from a young age as a kid? Were you always kind of sketching and drawing, or was it something
Yeah.
you like? How'd you end up in school for it?
Yeah, I from a really young age, like as long as I can remember, I just liked drawing. Like I used to like I feel like I've memories of telling my mom that I would work on The Simpsons and stuff when I was like
Hmm.
a really young kid, that I
Yeah.
wanted to work at making cartoons, whatever that meant.
Yeah.
And through school, I was always that kid that drew.
Yeah.
I was always into that, and sorry, um, it that just kind of never left me.
Nice.
So by the time it came to like, all right, you're gonna finish school. What are you gonna do?
Right.
I was like, I want to do animation, and people were like, yeah, but what about fine art? Or I know even like my father would be like, maybe we could get you as a mechanic in the airport and do that kind of. And I'm like, nah. And like like people are kind of like, it's not super realistic. Like
Right. Right.
I know in some parts of the world it is, but Dublin is not one of them. So
Yeah.
it was a bit it was a bit like, is this realistic? You sure you definitely want to do this?
Yeah. Did you
But I
find
was
it?
just stubborn. It was the only thing I would pick. I couldn't be talked into anything else, so that's what I did.
Did you find it like very challenging once you kind of got into school and like you talked about coming out of school and not finding work, like
Yeah,
that process, was it very challenging for you to kind of get your foot in the door with your first job?
yeah, for sure. I think I finished college at 22, and I got my first job when I was 26.
Oh wow.
So And like I said, there's only so in Dublin. See, I guess if you're willing to move for the job, makes it easier.
Right.
But I didn't have the money to do anything like that. Parents didn't have the money to send me to do anything like that. I was almost going to move to the other side of Ireland on my own to a little county called Galway because someone offered me an internship in a game studio. Actually, like I think there was like 5 people working there, that kind of thing, which is kind of what I expected to be my
Hmm.
first job, something really small like that. Um, but I right after college, I got a job in IT because it was essentially like now I'm finished college. My parents had paid for that. Like I have to pay rent now, so
Yeah.
get to work.
Yeah.
So I started working in IT, and for the next couple of years, I just spent like many hours a day as I could working on my portfolio and trying to get good enough. And it was tough. Like I remember thinking, like, oh God, am I gonna make it into a
Yeah.
studio? Like, am I gonna get to do this? Or should I just cut my losses and, you know, I don't know, become a manager in an IT company
Right.
somewhere or something?
So how did you
Um,
kind of get through that? Like, let's say for somebody who's listening who's kind of in a similar situation, how did you navigate that and come out the other side and
yeah,
kind of end up landing that gig?
I wish I had a solid answer for that, but really my thought process was um, kind of two things. I've come this far, so it's it's such a waste of so many years of practice and go to college and all that to just pack it in.
Right.
That was a big thing. But also, I kind of felt I used to have this uh, saying, the saying, if you throw enough muck at a wall, eventually something will stick.
Hmm. Yeah.
That 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 would just come back to me a lot.
Yeah.
That was actually something that literally I would remember that phrase many times because I thought, well, if I just keep trying, it's not like I'm gonna grow old and die and I've
Right.
never got it. Like
Right.
eventually I will get something somewhere and I'll go from there.
So what kind of things did you try? Like, what were some of you said you started off in this kind of 2D and 2D backgrounds and
Yeah.
eventually ended up in characters. What other things did you try out? What was kind of your
Well, I mean, after college, I went during college is when I did most of the. Maybe like the first time I did 3D animating. I really enjoyed it, and I still have like I said, my wife is a 3D animator, so we've been meaning to sit down and her to kind of talk me through that and maybe start practicing a little bit doing that again because I really enjoyed that at college.
yeah.
But that was when I was trying different things for the most part.
Yeah.
But once I finished college, what I was focusing on was essentially illustration,
Hmm.
um, and kind of concept art, which I think is a really common thing to like mishmash those two things. You see a lot of portfolios for like young artists that they don't really know, they can't really understand the difference yet, and they're just kind of their portfolio is just a mix of the both of those. So
Yeah.
I was kind of I fell into that camp, I would say,
How do
for
you
a
how do
long time.
you now with your experience, how do you differentiate the two?
Well, I mean, an illustration, like, there's a big difference between a book cover and
Hmm.
then concept art needs to be functional and needs to be something that can work for the animated film, be it in 2D or 3D. Turnarounds, like a full description of like how this thing is going to work, and
Right.
it's a lot more functional. It's not just a pretty picture.
Right.
You know.
Right. For sure. That was one of the things that my teacher taught me. I did like a mentorship under a concept artist, and his whole thing that he always like drilled into me from the beginning. He said design is functional. He said, you're
Yes,
not making pretty pictures. You're making designs that work.
exactly.
And like he always talks about like one of his like biggest pet peeves is that you see a lot in like let's say like sci-fi designs, where a lot of times people will make, let's say, whatever, like a suit of some sort, and
Mhm.
they'll kind of like add a bunch of like tubes and wires and all these things to like make it look cool. And
Yeah,
but if you point to any specific one, you'd be like, okay, what does that do? And they're like,
yeah.
oh, I don't know.
Where's that
Yeah,
going? Yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And like that was like something that like was really drilled in from early on, and it's true. I mean, especially like now I kind of have put my focus more into like toy design. Um,
Yeah,
and like there also, it's like, and that really kind of served me very well because it's like every single thing you do needs to, have that function. Like, you really got to think functionally, not just what's going to look good. And obviously you want it to look good, but it's
absolutely.
not the end all be all.
Yeah, and I think actually it's the opposite in that the finding a limitation can feed creativity.
Mm-hmm.
So like the limitation being this should work. Like at least in theory, this should have some sort of function. It makes you have to think more about it rather than just tube goes here, then goes here.
Right.
It's not random. Like when it feels more tangible, and I think that actually lends to appeal.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah, I think when you see something, you kind of can, even if it doesn't, even if it's not 100% functional, because again, you're dealing with sci-fi or fantasy where these things aren't,
yeah,
real,
yeah.
but
It's a
when it
fantastical element.
looks functional, it's you can tell, like there's a
Exactly. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
you
Something is from the real world is feeding it rather than
yeah,
it just being like you said, like random.
right, just to kind of like noise to make it look
Exactly.
more sci-fi.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. So then how
yeah,
did you get into characters? How did you kind of choose that and kind of focus in on that?
yeah. So, I like I said, I was drawing and painting, doing a lot of backgrounds, and then very quickly, you know, trying to do illustrations, I was adding characters to these images, and I kind of slowly became more and more keen on just drawing and painting characters, and that led into me like obviously I've done a couple of years of life drawing at this stage, so I've got some anatomy knowledge and stuff like that. But that then led me to focus more on, I'm on YouTube watching video tutorials on anatomy and getting reference and stuff, and studying anatomy, doing like drawing arms and forearms and trying to figure out all that kind of stuff. Which And I did that for a stint of time, which led to, once I started using ZBrush, that all fed into that. And so I was able to, once I started to get to grips with ZBrush as a tool,
Yeah.
all that stuff was just transferred straight over,
Yeah.
and it made more sense in my brain. I think that can happen where in 2D I felt, like you're trying to get what's in your head in
Hmm.
front of you. And once I switched to 3D, it just made so much more sense to me. It
Yeah.
just became really intuitive.
Yeah.
Where
100%.
in 2D, it was always fighting. I was
I
always
find with
fighting it.
2D, it's like you're trying to fake something looking 3D, right? As in, if
Oh yeah,
I'm trying to make a form, and so I want it to be convincing that this 2D image is 3D and has volume to it. But with
exactly.
3D, it just does. It just has the volume, so you don't need
Yeah,
to fake it. I'm
yeah,
the same way. That 2D, because when I studied, like I started with 2D and doing all the 2D, foundational stuff, the perspective and rendering and et cetera, and anatomy. And
yeah,
then once I kind of started with ZBrush, I was like, all right, and I just kind of like dropped everything else, like all the 2D stuff. I was
yeah,
like, like this just makes so much more sense. This is just so much more, like you said, more intuitive. It just like,
yeah.
and
It
I
feels
think
right.
I think there's some people who are the opposite. Like I've definitely spoken to some people who feel that 2D is more intuitive, and I'm like, more
Yeah,
power to you. But
absolutely.
yeah, but 3D, and just it's cool that you could like really just kind of turn things around and look at them from all different angles, and and understand the form in that kind of 3D space. Like it makes
Yeah,
it
big
more.
time. And that was when I started working in Brown Bag, and I met an artist there, uh, Brice Lavelle Saint Martin, who at that time, he's more on the business end of things now. But he was he is a great sculptor, and he joined, and there was a lot of buzz around him joining, because he was big on ArtStation at the time and stuff. People were like, "See, this guy's starting next week or whatever," and he came in, and at that time I had all these ZBrush models, and but I was basically just hitting Shift R in ZBrush and posting that. and I
Yeah.
knew nothing about rendering or anything like that. I could literally just sculpt in ZBrush. Anything I'd learned about topology or anything in college, that was gone.
Yeah.
UV is gone. And then he was uh, he was like, you should try to render these properly and present your work better. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll try. And he was like, Arnold Render is a good, or no, actually, sorry, he was ah Pixar's one.
Marmoset?
No, Pixar's Renderman.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
Uh, he was like, you should try that. That's really good. And so I did, and that's actually where one of my actually my first the first sculpt I ever did that like kind of made noise. It was
Hmm.
like it trended a bit. The mouse sculpt. That was the first time that I rendered something properly. I took it into Maya, decimated it, took it into Maya, and started setting up lights. And like that in 2D, like I'd be trying to paint lighting,
Right.
and it was just like a, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, exactly how I want, I could just place lights and move them and be like, not
Right.
quite there, and change the color of lights and stuff. And it was much more intuitive.
What do you do
And
your renders in nowadays? What are you mostly rendering in?
Unreal Engine now.
Oh, nice.
Which I'm really enjoying. I haven't been using Unreal Engine for too long, but I'm already like really super into it. But for the longest time, it's Arnold Renderer is what I
Hmm.
used most. Um,
Hmm.
and it's a great renderer. I really enjoyed. I love Arnold Renderer. So, but I once I took it into Unreal, I could just spin the camera around and move things, and it just always looked good. I was like, right, this is me.
Yeah. Have you been using Unreal for anything else other than rendering? Like, have you been playing around with it and trying to learn it for, where making video games or cinematics, stuff of that nature, or
Um, yeah, well, in terms of right now, I'm trying to get to grips with shading for the
hmm.
most part. But that's part of my job now, right? Because um, so that's kind of the focus
Hmm.
for now. But I can see myself just wanting to learn as much about it as possible, just in terms of having, the more tools you've got in your belt, the more opportunities
Right.
you have for like
For
different
sure.
creative solutions to things and
Yeah,
so
for
on. So
sure.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
Unreal Engine is one of those tools I really want to learn. I was talking to somebody the other day and talking about we were talking about it was with Shane Olson talking
Oh
about
yeah,
rendering and talking about like rendering in ZBrush. They have Redshift in ZBrush now,
yeah.
and I find Redshift in ZBrush very difficult
It
to
is.
wrangle.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I was
yeah,
part of the beta test for when that became a thing, and I was
yeah,
really excited. And I remember when I got the email, I was thought like this could be really good for your workflow and stuff. So I was like gunning for it. I was like, this is
yeah,
this is awesome.
yeah,
But yeah, it's like Redshift is a great rent. I've used that before. Like when I've used it in Maya, it's great. But I think it lends better to how Maya works. I
right,
don't ZBrush the way ZBrush needs to work for it to be what it is
right.
kind of contradicts,
The
especially when you've
intuitive,
used it in Maya and it
yeah,
works so well in Maya.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, it doesn't. It's a you have to fight it more.
yeah,
And you can't do certain things that you can do that you would expect to usually be able to do,
right.
like with your maps and stuff like that you would usually do when you're texturing and rendering something.
Yeah, and just in general, like I just find it kind of like I had a very hard time just wrangling it in
Yeah,
ZBrush, and so I was talking to him, he said try he suggested Blender, like he said try
yeah,
rendering in Blender, um, because like just it has that flexibility of being able to just kind of move the lights around and and set up your scene a lot easier, and more intuitively. Um,
yes.
so I've been trying to like kind of teach myself Blender now because it's one of those things like everybody talks about, but I never actually like took the time to learn it.
Right there with you.
But yeah,
Yeah,
but so like I said to him like Blender versus Unreal, and he said Blender is a lot easier to just like jump in and learn. He said you could learn Blender in an afternoon. Unreal, it's like that's a whole other universe that you got to kind of open yourself up to, because it's, again, I've had exposure to Unreal, but I've never like really, gotten, rolled my sleeves up and like got my hands
Yeah,
dirty
yeah.
with it. But it's not so, from what I understand, it's not so simple to just like jump in and learn in a couple of days. It's like a real,
I guess
uh,
it depends on what you want to learn. Like the first thing I did in Unreal was take one of the characters that I'd already done
hmm
and rendered it in Arnold. I just took that character, uh, took the textures and um, re-exported them from
hmm
Substance under the Unreal template. Um, and then, so I just wanted to figure out, right, how do I get this character into Unreal and get the textures on it and the shading looking the way I want it? And then how do I make some lights? And then you like you've got that like the fab library where you just like grab pathways and some buildings in the back, which I and then the post processing in the camera, which is really simple and really easy to use.
hmm
Uh, like if that's all you want to do, I would say that's quite easy. Like a
hmm
couple of days and you'll have that done.
hmm
You know, where it's it's not to say I think Blender is hard to learn. Um, the difficulty for me to learn Blender is because I already know how to do it in Maya.
mm,
And so I'm sitting there fighting a new software, which
yeah,
I know for sure Blender is a super powerful tool
yeah,
and it does so many things. Like you can do real time in it, you can sculpt in it, you can do UVs in it, you can box
right.
model,
It's really an
and
all-in-one software.
it really is. And now we've it just what was the name of the movie? It just won
The
an Oscar.
flow,
Yeah, yeah. Like
yeah.
so
That's just
that's
like
an
a
argument for like Blender
case
could
study.
be, yeah, this absolutely has a place as a pipeline
Yeah,
software in a studio. Where that was always the argument against Blender was, well, Maya's made like studio pipelines work around Maya
right.
and or Houdini in some cases, but usually Maya up till this point at least. So I think if Blender keeps going in the direction it is, we could see a big shift, which would, you know,
Yeah.
that
I
would
mean, Blender's
push
strength has
Autodesk to have to make some changes probably
yeah, I mean,
to
their
keep up.
strength has always been the open source nature of it.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's the fact that and it's such a large community, so everybody's using it, and then they want feedback, and somebody goes along and takes that feedback and improves it, and next thing
Yeah,
whatever it is that you want added is
yeah,
added.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
I
And
saw one time a whole breakdown of like over the years of like Blender and the different features that were added at different points. And it was not a
yeah,
long time. It was maybe over the course of like 10 years. It went from extremely primitive to, very sophisticated because again,
yeah,
it's the community, it's a community of people who love it are going and investing their time and resources
yes.
to improve it. And it's
And
really
they
cool.
love it. The
Yeah.
community around Blender is good. I remember, like, even when I used to do Pixelogic Live, and I'd be sitting there working away in ZBrush and teaching people, and they'd be asking questions, and it'd be constant. Do you like ZBrush or Blender? Blender does that better. And you're like, you're trying to ignore it because I don't want to be sitting here on
Right.
Pixelogic's channel talking about Blender necessarily. You know what I mean? Not that they'd give out about it, but
Right.
just I'm here to show
Let's talk
off
about
ZBrush.
ZBrush.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's but I see it more and more. I actually the before I was in this job, I was doing freelance with a game studio for a while on a big game that's it's I don't know if I can talk about it yet, but
hmm
so it would be safe. But and that that pipeline was using Blender,
hmm
more to test, but
Right.
it
I
was
was
still
gonna say,
using
Blender, you
Blender.
can't really do video games in Blender as of
No,
yet.
no, it was more for they were it was essentially they'd created tools for certain they created tools that made reaching a certain style
hmm
like kind of automated, which were
mm
and they were amazing, and it
hmm
really worked well. That's the most I've ever. At that point, I was forced to use Blender,
Yeah.
so which was great. Like it, because I want to.
Yeah.
It's just every time I bounce off it because of like of what I said. Like I'm trying to figure out how to move things around, extrude, and
Right.
all these simple things that I've known how to do for years, and I can do it so quick because I'm so used to Maya for years now
Right.
that yeah,
No,
it's I
but I
just keep
think
bouncing off because of it.
I think the pipeline is like, you do your sculpting, let's say in ZBrush, then send it over to Blender, and again use it for, you can kind of use it for the rendering and use it for kind of, let's say if you want to do whatever, cinematics or whatever, you
Yeah,
take your sculpts out of ZBrush, you retopologize them in Blender, and rig them and do, like, you can really do it all in Blender. And
yeah,
again, from what I understand, it's relatively intuitive. It's, pretty straightforward.
yeah.
And you could, like, all of a sudden you can make. I mean, there was a guy I talked to a few days ago who taught himself Blender, and he makes these like really cool like videos, and does the whole thing, like he does this whole process in Blender, and it looks great and it's really cool.
Yeah,
Like, it's, how powerful it is.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you don't even need to use ZBrush. You could sculpt it straight in Blender. You could
Yeah, I
just do
haven't tried
that
sculpting in
whole
Blender,
thing.
but I
No.
love ZBrush. I really,
Yeah.
I'm
I,
a
I,
ZBrush
I,
fanboy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I wouldn't, I haven't sculpted in Blender. I've watched people sculpt in Blender, and it's great. And I'd say its power there is the fact that like when I'm using ZBrush, I almost use ZBrush and Maya simultaneously. Like I
Mm.
constantly just I'll be working on a mesh and I'll just export and import into Maya to the point now that it's almost like an automatic. My
You a
hands
hockey
just
for
do it, yeah.
it.
Um, and I'll box model for a bit and then pop that back into ZBrush and move it
Mhm.
about and just keep working like that. Where the power that's the power that Blender brings to the table is that you don't need to leave the software. You can just do it there
Yeah.
and then keep using the sculpting tools and pop back into like some box modeling and
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah.
Especially well not especially but maybe first when you're doing stylized work like you're kind of working a lot in kind of lower poly
Hmm.
numbers to keep things clean and smooth and stuff. So yeah, it's so there's definitely something to be said for that end of
Yeah.
it. But I think for actual just sculpting, I still think ZBrush has the edge.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely. I think ZBrush is the most powerful sculpting tool that's out there on the market. I don't
Yeah,
think. I think other ones have, you could say they have advantages or whatever, but I
exactly.
think all around, I think ZBrush is still the king of the hill, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would agree. I would agree. I think I've seen some interesting stuff from like something I really want to try. I recently got the MetaQuest 3 VR
Mm.
headset, so I really want to try get into some VR sculpting.
Actually, I just spoke with a guy who does all his sculpting in VR.
Oh
He
wow.
does it all in Gravity Sketch, and there's one other app, I forget what it
Okay, yeah.
was. Um, and yeah, I was talking about it because it's very interesting. The he was saying, he was saying about with the VR sculpting stuff that, um, let's say Gravity Sketch, is that they kind of created it as a concepting tool. So
Oh yeah.
it's a little bit primitive in terms of what it can do. And he was saying, like, he wishes that there was a bit more. It had a bit, like, for example, like one thing he was saying, you can't do any kind of subtractions. You can't do, like, let's say in ZBrush we have live booleans, right, which is super powerful. There's nothing even like that, and no subtractive tool whatsoever in Gravity Sketch. Because again, they kind of made it as this like concepting tool. Um, but yeah, he does everything in really great stuff too. I mean, he makes like collectibles and art toys. That's kind of his thing. And then he does it for like 3D printing. So he does it all in Gravity Sketch and then sends it over to his 3D printer, and they look great, like super stylized, but like really
Yeah.
cool stuff. And yeah, it's all done in VR. It's very interesting. It's you
Yeah.
know
Yeah, it's great. I
yeah.
mean, the process in which you use to create something will affect the outcome
Hmm.
of what you're trying to create, right? So like if you use watercolor to do a painting, you're going to get a different result than if you use
Yeah.
oils.
Yeah.
So even the process in which like the order in which you put the steps
Yeah.
will change the outcome somewhat, sometimes a lot.
Yeah.
Your process, like talking about like a ZBrush process of, I know you were talking about talking to Shane Olsen. Like I've talked to Shane Olsen about the ZBrush process before. I did some videos with him for his school, and talked a bit at length about the process, that because we both kind of, our processes are quite similar
Hmm.
in terms of taking primitive shapes, placing them, skewing them a little bit, getting the silhouette and stuff that way, the primary forms that way,
Yeah.
even some secondary forms. Well, actually, yeah, and secondary forms. I should say even some tertiary forms. And that way of doing it means you have so much control over each individual shape
Hmm.
without affecting the shapes around them, and you can really control your silhouette and your curves and your lines and your edges. Um, and then you just dynamesh that all together and you can go from there. But if you just start from a sphere, hit dynamesh and just start pulling stuff out,
Right.
I mean you're gonna get a different result.
A
You
hundred
can,
percent.
even if you're trying to get the same result, it's just gonna look different because of the nature of that process, right?
Yeah. No, for sure.
So
No question
it's I
about it.
think VR is really interesting because it's so different. It's such a different process.
Yeah.
I'd be really interested to get
Yeah.
more into that and
One thing he
figure
was
out.
saying, he that was interesting. He said that, like, I didn't even think about this, but he was saying he finds that VR also, you get much more. He finds that he's more creative in VR.
Mm,
He was like going for, at one point he said he was going for a PhD, and he wanted to like write his whole like thesis about how VR affects creativity. And
nice.
he was talking about how, because one of the things that he said with VR is that you really have no distractions. Like if you're on your computer
Yeah.
using whatever ZBrush or Maya or any of the softwares, and you get a ping that you get a new message or a new email, it's
Yes.
very easy to get distracted. When you're in VR, you're totally immersed. You're in it,
Big time.
And he's saying also just the way that the tools work in the VR is that they're just a lot quicker. Like you could just kind of drop things in, which I don't necessarily fully agree with, because I think if you kind of customize your ZBrush, and have all your hotkeys in place, you can move very quickly without really having to think.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I hear where he's coming from. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. I
interesting.
guess having that, like, what what appeals to me is having the sculpt in front of you and having it large.
Yeah.
And if you think, I don't know if you have much experience doing life drawing, but I remember doing in life drawing, like you don't do life drawing on an A4 page, you do it on an A3
Hmm.
massive big sheet of newsprint paper,
Hmm.
and you're like you'd be sweating by the end of a lot of life drawing classes, and especially if you this come in, they're like, we're gonna do gesture today. You're like, oh Jesus, okay. Whew. And you're
The
like
full body
whipping,
workout.
yeah, you're really, your whole body is moving, and you're like, rip that page off. Next, you got 20 seconds or 10 seconds or 5 seconds to just, you basically do a line that suggests this
Right.
pose and all this kind of
Right.
stuff. And but there's the the more I did that, the more I realized there's really 100% like a reason to be doing this way
Hmm.
rather than trying to do it on an A4 page, like putting your whole body into it. And like there is a, a sense of putting yourself into it, and
Mm.
and more creativity, more flow, and more, it's more visceral or something.
Yeah.
You're really into it.
Yeah.
You've got like just a stick of charcoal in your hand. You're just, like you're really reacting.
Right. And you
And
don't have like the time to necessarily like think about it. You're just kind of
yeah,
doing.
yeah, you're just feeling it
Yeah.
rather than constant, like, and they say, creativity is stifled if you think too much, if you slow
Hmm.
down too much. You need to keep at a certain speed, at the early stages,
Yeah.
to like really get the creative blood flowing, if you like.
Yeah.
And I think VR could, because of the nature of, like, there's no little screen that you're stuck to. You
Right.
have
You're in
you
it.
can stretch your arms out and you can really get into it. I think it
Yeah.
could maybe have that, the closest thing you can get for digital sculpting or painting,
Yeah.
uh, to like life drawing.
Yeah,
which I think
yeah.
is really interesting.
I've played around with it a little bit. It's very cool, and it's definitely a different sort of feeling than sitting at a desk in front of a computer. Like what you're saying.
Oh
It's
yeah,
you're like you're in it, and I was telling the other guy this earlier is with like um so my mentor was working on a project and he was making a vehicle and he was using Gravity Sketch in VR. And one thing that was really cool about it is that you make a cockpit and then you can actually go and like put yourself inside the
yeah,
cockpit and like it's just it's a totally different way of approaching design, which was
yes,
it's really cool.
yeah.
It's
That's super fun to be able to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I don't know if it'll ever become kind of mainstream, but I definitely think that there's definitely a place for it. You know?
Yeah. Well, I think like I don't know if you're familiar with Geo Napkil.
No,
I'm
no.
saying his name right. You know the Geo brush
Okay,
in
yeah,
ZBrush. Have you seen that? Yeah,
yeah.
that's named after him
Okay.
because his thing is like he's like the king of sculpting flesh,
Uh
right?
huh.
He does these so many of these beautiful and bizarre sculptures, and so many of them are just about like compression in the skin, and you'd have like hands pushing into like fatty
Uh huh.
tissue and that compression up and um folds and wrinkles and stuff like that, and that he seems to love that because it's a lot of what he posts, and he's incredibly good at it,
Uh huh.
and the patience he has as well, because he really gets into like really nitty gritty detail, and they're amazing. And I think he uses is it medium substance medium maybe the VR. How come I'm getting that wrong now?
Maybe. Because the guy said two. He said gravity, and he said another one. It might have been. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, I think I'm drawing a blank now because there's two. I know Gravity Sketch, and then there's two others, and I'm sure it's medium, and
Hmm.
but there's another one. Ah, it's on the tip of my tongue. And I'm sure medium is the one that he uses.
So he's
Um,
he's doing his sculpting in VR.
yes.
Uh huh.
So
Interesting.
he works in ZBrush, but he's also doing this, and he seems to be, from what I can tell, becoming a bit of a spokesperson for this for sculpting in VR,
Uh
because
huh.
he was the one who showed me like, wow, this could be like this is properly like really good sculpting. This isn't like what VR was to sculpting in the very early days,
Yeah.
where it's like this isn't even comparable to what you're doing in ZBrush and
Right.
stuff. It doesn't have the capabilities of it. But what he's doing is as good as any ZBrush sculpts.
Wow.
So it's
Is he
it's
doing it
there.
100% in VR, or is he
Yeah.
starting it in ZBrush and then sending it over? Or
No, I think he's doing it 100% VR. Yeah.
wow.
Don't quote me on that, but I would say I've never like I've seen him sculpt in like the early stages of it in VR, and then seeing like he'd share clips on Instagram,
Yeah.
stuff like
Yeah. Oh,
that.
interesting.
And yeah, like you can see his whole process for the
Yeah.
VR.
Yeah. No, it's
So
it's it's
there's no
definitely a
reason not
really cool approach to sculpting.
to.
It's definitely it's again. I don't see it becoming mainstream in the near future, but I
No.
think people who use it will kind of have I don't know if I call it an advantage, but like have a certain you know something that sets them apart. Like you were saying before about how
Yeah.
like how you approach your sculpt is going to affect how it looks.
Yes.
Hundred
Yeah. I
percent.
mean, I agree. I don't see it becoming a part of any pipeline necessarily. But
Right.
then again, you could say the same thing. ZBrush isn't necessarily part. It's like it's the same with texturing. Like Substance Painter and ZBrush in a pipeline for a studio are interchangeable. Like
Hmm.
if you go to a studio and you're like, oh, I don't use, they're like, what software do you need? You could, if you say ZBrush or you say Blender, they don't care
Right.
because it's not affecting. Because at the end of the day, that sculpt is just going to be exported into whatever,
Right.
be it Maya or Houdini or maybe Blender nowadays, maybe let's see, but or Unreal or whatever it is. Like that's not having any effect. It's still
Right.
an FBX or an OBJ or whatever. It's not having an effect on the follow up. software.
Yeah.
And it's the same with textures. Like you're just exporting PNGs. Like it doesn't matter where you got the PNGs from.
Yeah.
So, you
I,
know,
I, I'm
if
just
you
waiting
don't,
for the day when we can kind of remove the whole retopology thing and have it done.
yeah,
That's one application that I hope AI does do. It's like take my
yeah,
ZBrush
yeah,
sculpt
yeah.
and
Just press
retopologize it
the
for me.
retopple button and it just actually does it. Yeah,
It's cool, but it's really cool that like how there's so much crossover between softwares now that everything is so compatible with the other that it used
yeah,
to be like you have to use this software
yeah,
to be compatible, and now it's like no, whatever works for you as long as you get the result we want. And
yeah.
it's really
Exactly.
cool. It'll be cool to see kind of how things develop over the next few years.
For sure. Yeah, I can see Blender becoming more and more. I
For
am
sure.
seeing it become more and more prevalent in studios.
I think this flow winning the Oscar I think is gonna kind of
Yeah,
make it like undeniable. Like this
exactly.
this is here to stay,
There's
and
the
it's
proof.
and it's
Yeah,
yeah, and it's a you know it's got its perks. Like it is usable, and I
yeah,
mean, and I've seen people who single handedly make whole projects by themselves that
yeah,
are maybe they're not Oscar worthy, but you know like this guy I was telling you before, like he makes these like short videos, puts them on YouTube, and he has like a whole following of people who watches his videos, and they're great.
yeah,
They're 2 3 minute videos, or maybe they're up to 6 minutes, and they're great. And it's like this one guy doing it by himself, in Blender, and especially I've been having this is like a recurring conversation I've had with pretty much every single person I've spoken to, um, about how like we're now seeing more and more kind of independent creators and independent
oh yeah,
studios and small scale studios, and I think like Blender is a big part of that equation to make that possible. That like anybody with a little bit of patience and that's willing to put the work in can learn these tools and make whatever it is they want to make. Make movies. Make with Unreal. You can make your own little video games. I
yeah.
saw a friend of mine who was teaching himself Unreal, and then he was using AI like not ChatGPT. He was using Claude, but he would use the AI to like um generate code to like help like plug into Unreal
Gotcha.
to like basically like, and he was like basically on his own making this. It was a very simple game. It was like a little pirate ship that you like go around in the pirate ship and like shoot a cannon at like other pirate
Yeah,
ships.
yeah.
Like it was like very simple, but still like he taught himself this in like a month, maybe not even.
Wow.
And it's like it's really cool like what's possible nowadays with
Big
all these
time. Like
tools.
when you think 10, 15 years ago, what you would have had to do to get to that point, like in a month, there's no way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I like that's to me like the industry isn't in a great place for games or movies, or animation, I should say. But well, yeah, movies in general. But um, I, there's many reasons for that, and I'm no there's many I don't understand. But
Mm-hmm.
um, part of that is also that the cost of making games and movies is gets higher and higher.
Yeah,
And so, when you need to and these are companies that need to make a profit. And so the risk, because the cost goes up, the risk goes up.
right.
So if there's that game that like, yeah, that's got something, it could be really good, but oh, we better not because it's going to cost this much to make and we can't
Yeah,
afford to take that risk. Um, so, I think things like Blender, allowing like like you said, the indie scene to grow. Even and I struggle to advocate AI, but if it took its place in helping people not to replace art,
right.
but to learn and be, become be able to create what they want to create
Yeah,
and get
yeah,
that faster without just skipping steps entirely. Like create all
yeah.
my art. That's a different
No,
but
but
that's a different topic.
I think
But
that's kind of where it's gonna when all the dust settles. I think that's what we're gonna end up with. I think it's gonna end up with
yeah,
as another tool that just kind of helps speed up
I
the
hope so.
process.
I hope so.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I really I don't think it for a number of reasons. I don't think it has the ability to replace artists. I think the
yeah,
only artists that are at real risk of losing jobs are people who are doing kind of low level graphic design work, right? And people who are making
mm,
like billboards and posters, stuff of that sort. Because there you're dealing with, let's just say whatever, for example, let's say, a dental office needs a billboard they're going to put on the side of the highway,
yeah,
right? So I might go pay an artist, $500 to make it versus I could have it made with AI. And again, as a dental office who doesn't necessarily care that it has to be perfect and everything has to make
yeah,
sense, I'm just trying to get people to look at it and call my office, you
yeah,
know. So I like, but in terms of again going back to what we were saying before about with design, that real design is functional. That's just something that AI is incapable of executing on now, and I think I very strongly feel that it's never going to really be able to create functional art
yeah,
because the fundamental thing that AI lacks is understanding. Like, and people talk about like this is kind of like getting off topic a bit, but like people talk about AI in this sort of like with this like metaphysical like lens of like, oh, it's going to be this like godly power, and I feel like a lot of that comes from the sci-fi that we kind of grew up on, you know? Like, yeah, will it be super powerful? 100%. But the way I look at AI, again, not even an art scene, just as a general, rule, is that like AI is to brain power what, power tools are to manpower, right? As
sure,
in, if I want to go dig a hole, I could, in theory, go get a shovel and try and dig it myself and spend weeks and weeks and weeks to dig a hole that's, 10 feet deep and, 10 feet by 10 feet wide. Or I can go get into an excavator and have it done in an afternoon,
yeah,
right? And so, but does the excavator have its own ability to understand that a hole needs to be not even understand? Does an excavator have the ability to dig a hole by itself? No, it needs somebody to sit in and operate it and to dig the hole where it needs to be dug in the dimensions it needs to be. And I think AI is the same thing, just with again like thinking power of whatever it is, equations, solving mathematical equations, doing people are saying a lot of like white collar work, right? Like law, let's say, writing up contracts, stuff of that sort.
yeah,
It'll kind of, but again, it's a machine that is we can apply to whatever problem we have and have that problem solved faster. But again,
yes,
it's not this like I again, this is my own personal belief. I don't think that AI is ever going to achieve like sentience and like become a life form. Like I just
yeah,
don't think that's possible.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the AI thing is really tricky. It's such a divisive thing,
Right.
and I'm definitely in the camp of keep AI out of my art. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And don't I don't want AI using my art
Right.
to just to take my job, that kind of
Right.
stuff. Like I get all of that. I get that why people are up in arms about it, and I'm right there with them. I don't want that happening. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Um, but um, yeah, I am of the mindset that I don't think you can just say, well, AI just has no use and we should never ever touch it for any reason in
Right.
any circumstance. So like
There's a middle
that
ground.
doesn't make sense to me. There's like just that blanket like black and white. Anything that black and white to me, I always feel like no, that can't be right.
Yeah.
But like like I was saying about where I think it can help in ways is even if it just sheds off some time for certain things. Like you said there, like there's some utility in like you were talking about law, like contracts and um I know I've seen it being used for like meetings to like basically write up a transcript of the
Mm-hmm.
meeting at the end of it and stuff like that and or even shave it down into bullet points for you and stuff like that. And which can allow for you to focus on the bigger things. And when those things seem small, but when you do it with many small things, all of a sudden it's a big thing
Yeah.
and when when games and movies, when people are struggling to make them because they cost so much money, the more the more of those simple things that you can shave off the focus on the big things, I think the closer we get to being able to, and things like Blender and just new tools, new technologies, Unreal, allowing people to get to a higher quality quicker, um, and make the movies and the games and whatever that they are trying to make with less roadblocks,
Yeah.
then it can slowly bring us back into a place where you can start to risk more because
Mm-hmm.
it's not this massive hill that you have to get over in order to create something.
Yeah,
Um,
for
and
sure.
that would create jobs because it means studios can like that they can take bigger risks, so they can green light more shows, more games, more just everything. So and that's what we need. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's the huge problem that we're facing now is
Yeah.
everyone's afraid to green light anything. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah. And
Especially
that's also,
especially new IPs. Like
yeah.
everyone just wants like already, all right, we'll make another Spider-Man. We'll make
Right.
another
Right.
Disney remake.
Yeah.
It's and that's the big reason why is because that feels like less of a risk because they
Yeah.
know they can feed off the
Yeah.
IP that people already know and love.
And then there's also added to that is the fact that there's just so much volume out there now. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a million and one streaming platforms, and each one is pumping out content. Every week there's a new show that they're putting out.
yeah,
So it's just the numbers don't add up to the point where if a studio greenlights a project, realistically, how many eyes are you going to get in front of? Unless it's
mm,
one of these few that's hugely successful and everyone's talking about. But again, like those
yeah.
are those are I don't know if I call them flukes because like those do tend to be very good projects, but again, few and far
I
between.
Yeah, but I think I think you're onto something when you say a fluke because it's not that it's a fluke that it's not that good, but it just somehow made, it just somehow
Right,
got the attention of everybody.
right.
But it's there's so much. They're actually like me and my wife have been watching Yellowstone,
Mm-hmm.
and I just seen some clips of Yellowstone over time, and there's something about Kevin Costner as a cowboy owning a ranch somewhere that speaks to me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I can see myself on a horse in the middle of nowhere. Like that speaks to me with a whiskey, and a cigar. But that if I hadn't seen a couple of clips of that, I would never have watched it.
Right.
And but I did, and it popped up on Amazon Prime, I think, and um, so we just started watching it, and we there was so many other shows that looked good, and we could have clicked on that, but we didn't. We just happened
Yeah.
Yellowstone popped up in the little box when we were looking
Yeah.
for something. We were
You're like,
like,
oh,
yeah,
I
we'll
heard
try
about
it.
it.
Yeah, and it's great, and we're really enjoying it. And I know many people really enjoy it, and like many other shows that we could have also been watching, but that's the one that we clicked on. And
Yeah.
it just takes, that's where I think the fluke is like there's a bunch of great stuff to watch, and some of it's older too
Mm-hmm.
that just never got seen, that you end up watching, you're like, this is great.
Yeah.
And so it can work both ways where you can create something great and it just no one sees it.
Yeah.
It could have been great
I
if
mean,
it was advertised
that's not
more
even
or
that's not even new. I mean, you see that with like the Disney movies from the early 2000s. Like there were a bunch of these Disney animated movies that were really good movies that just
yeah.
kind of flopped at the box office, like Treasure Planet,
I was going to say Treasure
and
Planet.
like
Yeah,
those were amazing movies that
yeah,
like that you go back and you watch them and you're like, why was this not more successful at the time? And this is
yeah,
before streaming services, right? This is before Netflix and before Disney Plus and Apple
yeah,
TV and Amazon Prime and every other one that's out there.
yeah,
So like it's not a new thing, but it's just been exacerbated through all the streaming services and all the different options you have out there. You
without
know,
doubt. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I wonder what that, like that is even still like streaming services is still even a relatively new thing. Like what's that look like? what does the world of streaming services instead of just TV or going to the movies look like in 20 years? And how
Yeah.
does that affect the industry? It's hard
Yeah.
to say. There's so many variables that it can affect that it's actually hard to say
Yeah.
exactly how that would affect the industry.
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting to see how things play out. And then now,
Yeah,
like the frustrating thing about streaming services now is that all of them are raising their prices, because it's
yeah,
expensive to maintain this,
yeah,
or they're doing ad support. And once you subscribe to all the streaming services because you want to be able to watch all the shows everyone's talking about, you're paying
yeah.
the same price you were for a cable, which is like
Or
the
more.
whole right, which is the whole
Yeah,
argument of why to get like it kind of came full
yeah,
circle.
yeah. It did.
It's
Yeah, because it. I think I try not to get all of them, but in Ireland and in the UK you can't get HBO Max,
mhm.
but in Spain you can. So
Uh-huh.
and I know there's certain things on that I wanted.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like Batman and
Yeah.
stuff like that on it that I was like, yeah, I want HBO Max.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting HBO Max. But I've already got Netflix. I've got Disney Plus. I've got Amazon Prime. Do I have anything else? I could have something else that I'm forgetting about. But it's getting to that point where you're like, oh yeah, do I have that?
Yeah.
Am I paying for that every month? And there is like I want Netflix because I want to watch Arcane.
Yeah.
And I want Amazon Prime because I want to watch Invincible.
Yeah.
Or Yellowstone or whatever it might
Right.
be. And I want Disney Plus. Like I worked on the Marvel show, on the Spider-Man show that came
Hmm.
out recently.
What'd you do for them?
And I was character modeler
Oh, cool.
for yeah, the new Spider-Man show that just released there on Disney Plus. And so I want to watch it.
Right.
I was on it and I want to see how it turned out.
Yeah.
And so I have but like I'm already tied into at least three.
Right.
Um, and I think everyone kind of, and I know people who they circumvent all this by getting some dodgy box installed in their house and they just get everything for free essentially, or like a monthly fee to some guy somewhere.
Yeah.
And I can't, and like part of me wants to say you're robbing from the industry that I work for, and the other
Yeah.
side of me is like, I get it, I get why you're
Yeah.
doing that, I
That's
totally understand.
it's a tough one. It's really it's
Yeah,
so tricky because like there's like you hear people who say like, oh, these companies are so greedy, and it's like,
yeah,
I don't know if it's that they're greedy or if it's that these are extremely expensive projects to create. And
yeah,
again, like what we've been saying is like it's a tremendous amount of risk that you're putting into it, and
yeah,
the reward, maybe it'll be a huge reward, and maybe you'll get nothing, and you'll
yeah.
lose out. It's just like,
And that's like Hollywood has been losing money in droves
hmm
for years now, I feel like. And
yeah,
so they really cannot afford
to
to
have
keep doing
flops.
that. And I feel like we're gonna keep getting flops for a while at least.
Yeah,
But I don't know. Maybe we'll see a turn, but I don't think we're there yet.
yeah, yeah. No, but again, I think we're moving into the era of the independent creator. I really
I
I
do
really do
too.
feel that way. Just
It's the same in games. I feel
yeah.
like AAA has
Hmm.
been flopping for a good while now, and we're seeing AA games is becoming all the most popular games are
Yeah.
in the AA.
For the same reason, again, because the AAA studios are doing what's safe, and so
Yeah,
they're like, okay, here's GTA 6,
yeah,
but
yeah.
then the AA
Well, that
studios,
will do really well, but
yeah.
that's the exception to the rule. Yeah,
But I'm
yeah.
saying,
It's
but as
another
in,
live service
yeah, yeah, and it's like, oh,
Marvel
here's
thing.
like buy things in game, and like
Yeah,
versus the AA studios who don't have as big of a budget, right? Don't have as big of a team,
yeah,
but again, just because the accessibility of the tools are able to make really great products that people are really excited about. And
absolutely.
next thing you know, there's this one game that I've been following, like their Instagram account for a while. I never actually played it, but it just looked really cool. I wish I could remember what it was called now. It was called like Unboxed, something like that.
Okay.
I don't remember, but it was basically it's like an old fashioned like third person shooter game. But it's like you're like
Yeah.
a little like action figure. So like you come out like the box,
Oh,
and then like you're
nice.
running around like a toy store and like like jumping off the shelves. Like it looks so cool. And it
Yeah,
was just
yeah,
this like small independent studio, a small team that made it. But you could tell
yeah,
like, you could tell they made it because they love this kind of game,
yeah.
and like it's just
And that kind of goes full circle to what we were saying before. One on limitation feeds creativity, right? Because you've got like 6 people, so you can't make the
right.
next live service AAA game when you're that size.
Yeah.
Uh, so and I think that create it forces creative systems and gameplay that AAA companies don't have the limitation to be forced into thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that is what you mentioned before about like a Blender and Unreal, making it easier for these studios with smaller budgets and fewer people, but they have the tools and technology now more than ever to still create. Like I played a game, The Ascent, and the studio that made that was 11 people,
Wow.
and it's an isometric shooter,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but it's the environments in it, and I was so blown away by it. I ended up like looking them up and looking for like how do they do this, only to find out it was 11 people and being even more mind blown because the backgrounds, the environments that you go through are incredibly detailed
Mm-hmm.
and beautiful, and they did a bunch of tricks to make it as efficient as possible, and they were just really smart about how they did it.
Yeah.
um I'm ashamed to say I can't think of the name of the studio now off the top of my head, but it's the same. Like I just picked up Split Fiction,
Mm-hmm.
to play that with the wife. Another double A game that's doing really well. I The last kind of game I would say that I played that I really enjoyed, it was Remnant 2. That's another double A smaller studio, but great game.
Yeah.
Not you know not shoving marketplaces in your
Right.
face and all that kind of stuff.
And
Just made a great game.
microtransactions and
Yeah, exactly. There's no live service.
right.
There was a game, 3 DLCs, and that's it. And
Yeah.
and and just good gameplay
Yeah.
and a cool world to
Yeah.
to explore.
No,
And
I think we're
yeah,
going through I think we're going through some changes now, but I think we're going to be better off for it. Like I really do believe that we're going
yeah,
to
I
come
hope
out
so.
with just more options and higher quality options because you're going to get it from real artists now. Not from companies
Yeah,
that are trying to again, not even like not I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of like maximizing profits and all that stuff. Like just again,
mhm,
companies that are seeking to minimize risk and maximize reward,
yeah,
and taking the safe route, right?
yeah,
And instead, they're gonna have to change course and start to take risks again, or they won't and they'll fizzle out. And again, but that'll just create room for independent creators to come along and create,
yeah,
art. That's what it is. It really is art, you know?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the hope is the only hope is that in the interim enough people can keep their heads above water,
Right.
because that's the really scary part of all of
Right.
this is so many artists out there, that are struggling to keep food on the table
Yeah.
is not nice. I mean,
Yeah.
I've felt it myself at a stage,
Yeah.
and I've managed to keep my head above water, but it is difficult, especially the world's not getting cheaper,
Right.
and it's no one's at a stage of their lives where they can afford to just, as long as you've got bills and stuff to pay. No one is at a stage in their life right now when the world is so much more expensive to live in
Yeah.
that they can afford to be out of work.
Yeah.
And it's in our industry, both in games and movies,
Yeah.
more people are out of work than have been in a long time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
But no, but again, I think from the conversations I've had, I've seen a lot of people who are kind of going the independent route
yeah,
and doing very well for themselves. Again, through the likes of Patreon and YouTube and Discord and again, like that's kind of the thing that that I've noticed a trend, and the people who are like really doing well right now outside of the conventional studio settings are the people who are like building communities and building, their again, I've been using this term so much, but their personal brand, and
Yes.
kind of, but really like going direct to consumer and being like, here's what I can do, here's what I can make, and they find the people who like what they have, and the people buy directly from them, and it's wonderful. It's a really, I love to see that, because like, maybe I don't necessarily like the work that the person's doing, right? Like, I'm not necessarily, for example, the guy's telling me about before, this guy who does all the sculpting in VR, he does like D&D miniatures, but like stylized.
Cool.
I'm like a big D&D fan, but the fact that he's making them and he has that community, like, I love that for him. That's
Yeah.
really cool, and it's like it's exciting to see that, and like it makes me feel like, oh, like, I think I could do this too, like kind of go and like
Yeah.
and kind of pave your own way and not be reliant on, having to be, you know having to get into a bigger studio or a bigger company,
Yeah.
and kind of just be a cog in the wheel, where you can, like, no, go ahead and
Think outside
find
the
your
box.
audience, and you know
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's again coming back to that limitation that
yeah,
feeds creativity. Like, if you can't find the work here, you got to start thinking outside the box,
yeah, for sure.
and thinking of stuff that you people don't necessarily jump to.
Yeah, do
But
you
yeah,
do what was that?
oh no, no, go on.
I was gonna say, do you do any of like the kind of online, like Discord, and like
Yeah.
engage with the? Because you have a big following, but do you engage with your following?
I try to. I I was actually gonna ask you how you feel social media and stuff is currently for that kind of thing. Because I remember I have I especially not as much at the moment, but there was a time where I did way more often. Now, at the same time, I do fairly regularly get people writing to me and asking questions about ZBrush or about their portfolio and stuff like that, and I always respond, and I always try to help, uh, because that was a big part of why I did the Pixologic Live. Was I love it. I love
Hmm.
being part of it, and you know,
Actively participating.
feeling actively part of the club, kind
Hmm.
of, I find the same in work. That's why a smaller studio suits me. I want to be part of the whole thing. I
Yeah,
don't just want to be, like you said, a cog. And I've been in that position where I've worked in studios and it's just like, here's a task, do that one. Now here's another task, do that one, and
yeah,
that's it. No one else really talks to you about anything else. Just do that. Now do this. And for some people, that's what they want. And but for me, I like that. I like to feel like part of the whole thing. And it's the same with the community, with ZBrush, with just artists, you know. And so I I still do, but I've I think life is just not as open right now for me to take,
yeah,
or it's not as obvious that I can just spend that time to really focus on that as
yeah,
much.
yeah.
Um, like, I would love to get back into streaming, um, just for fun, whether
Right,
it's 10 people or 2,000 people, I don't
right.
care. Like, it's just fun to chat with people and sculpt and talk about sculpting, and
Yeah, for sure.
help some people is great. Like, it feels good. Same in work. I
Hmm.
like helping. If a junior comes in, it's nice. It feels good, and after a while, you see they've gotten better, and you had some part in that, and that's nice. Um, and I did the Discord server thing. I did the streaming my own channel, and then streaming with Pixologic, and I've have over time, like, I've always tried to keep, as best I can, uh, personal work, posting personal work, and showing what I've been doing, or if I'm learning something new or whatever. Um, and also interacting with other artists. And just I've loads of artists that I know now which is surreal, too, kind of, to think of. Like, I know people from Spain. Like when I came to Barcelona, I had three people here that I knew already just from that, from like, they reached out to me years ago on Instagram, and now we kind of talk regularly ish, at least, or just always reply to each other's work and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Um, so yes, I do, but less now, I think.
Mhm.
Um, and I find it's harder now.
Mhm.
I find I post more. I've been progressively, my work has been getting better because I've learned more and
Mhm.
more experience. But it seems like the interaction goes down.
Yeah.
It's going down rather than up. And I've
Mhm.
talked to other people a little bit about this that
So
are having a similar experience.
so I'll tell you, like, what I've seen, there are certain, I think the whole online community thing is kind of like a job in and of itself.
Yeah,
Um because it does require a lot of time and effort. And there's some people who do it really well. Like for example, there's this young woman who streams for ZBrush Live now a lot, Layla Viscu, and she has an active Discord and she does ZBrush Live, and so she's like very active. But in her Discord server, like people are posting work and asking for feedback, and she's sitting there and giving like really detailed feedback, and it's great, and people really appreciate it, and it really helps kind of build her reputation. But it requires a lot of work and effort to sit down and look at everybody's work and give really thought out critiques, you know or even people who aren't doing it that way. There's another guy I spoke with who also again has a very active Discord community. He does illustrations on YouTube, um, and he has a very active Discord community. But again, to have an active Discord community, and I think Discord is really where the community is really built. I think Instagram is great for showing your work, and there's a kind of a surface level interaction there. But to have the real community building, you need to go to a Discord, or something of that sort. Um, but again, like it requires like real time and effort, because if you as the head of the this channel that everyone's coming to this channel for you, essentially, right? And so if you are not active on it, people are gonna very quickly move away from it. And because again, going back to the thing with like streaming services, like people are stretched so thin to the point where there's only really room for one or two or three places that people are going to really want to hang out and want to be at. And if you're not actively like making the community active, people are going to just fizzle out and go to the places where they do want to be. So like that's on the one hand, but at the same time, I think it has tremendous upsides potentially, right? With things like Patreon, with things like YouTube. If a person is consistent about posting on YouTube and really builds up a YouTube channel, they could really monetize and make a living off of it. You
yeah,
know, selling products. People, and there's a ton of 3D artists who sell courses and sell all kinds of things, 3D prints. I mean, the list goes on and on. So it's definitely doable, but it's still like it is kind of a job in and of itself. That's kind of how I've kind of come to that realization, through talking to people who do this. And it's very rewarding because again, then you get to like really you get to interact directly with the people who want to be interacting with you. And it's a really nice kind of exchange, but it requires a lot of work. That's what I've come to understand.
yeah. I think the like you said about streaming services, like that's like an increase in competition, I suppose, and that's a big, obviously going to be a big part of anything that's growing. Is the
Yeah.
it's why there's many people that have what they got into the right platform at the right time,
Mm-hmm.
and so you try to get in later, and the competition is now much larger, so you kind
Yeah.
of have to up your game in order to compete at that level. Like you said, like if you're not interacting or posting, or maybe even the quality of your what you're doing isn't good enough, because I feel like at that level it is coming down to, yeah, I like his content, but I like this person's content just as much, and their camera looks better and their sound is better.
Right.
So when I see those two come up, I'm going to gravitate towards this one
Um,
before this one.
I, I
If
think
the
that's
quality is the same, if they feel like the quality is in the same ballpark, kind of.
yes and no, because I don't think it all comes down to quality. I think there's more to it than that. Um, I think it also does come down to personality. That's, I think, a big part of it, because ultimately, I mean, all these people are people. You know what I'm saying? And they all, and so
Yeah, yeah,
some people will gravitate towards one personality over another. So then, let's say you have two streamers who are both ZBrush artists and posting live streams of sculpting, right? Exact same thing, right? But as in, I might gravitate towards A over B just because I like the way that they talk about it. Like
yeah,
it
yeah,
could be something as simple as that.
yeah.
That's part of it, and also part of it is this is one thing that I've kind of picked up on from talking to people and from their experience is the audience gravitate towards authenticity. So you might have two artists, right? You might have somebody who's working in AAA games, right? Top, senior artist at a game company, right? Who's putting out content, but their content is just kind of like, oh, here's my work, and like I'll do a quick demo of like how I made this horn, let's say, right? And everything's like perfect and polished. Versus the other guy who's like, kind of a junior blender artist who's self-taught, but it's like, oh, like I tried this method, but it didn't work, so I'm trying, and like, and they're kind of they're taking people along for the ride and kind of
Yeah.
giving them that
It's
authentic
more
peek
human
behind.
interaction
Yeah, I think people
than
really
just
that I think that ultimately is the one that wins out more,
sure.
because like, you know, and I'm sure you can relate this, like when you look at a person who's a AAA game artist, senior, character artist, very high level, right? As a casual consumer, right, or somebody who either whether you're a fan because you just like the artwork, or you're just starting out, or you do Blender as a hobby, whatever it is, wherever you're kind of holding, right? You might look at this person and be like, I can never get to where they are, right? And so there's this disconnect, right? Just from the get go of like, oh, I can never get to their level, so therefore that you kind of already kind of tune out. Whereas, oh, I got a reaction. Uh, versus like the other person who's kind of showing the who's at a lower level, it feels more accessible to the viewer. And that's not to say that the first person can't achieve that same result, right? It's just a matter of being more open and authentic, and allowing for the audience to witness the failures as well as the successes, right? I think
Yes.
especially when you are focused, when your sole focus is, I need to get jobs at studios, right? So therefore everything I put out online has to reflect my best work, right? That's something that I was told, like everything should reflect your best work. You should never put your bad stuff online. And that's true if you want to have a super polished, portfolio. But if you want to kind of tap into that like audience and build an audience that's coming to you for you, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. And so there's
Yes.
a place for both. On your ArtStation, put your best work, right? Have a really polished portfolio, and that's what you send to clients. But on Instagram, you don't have to be as polished. That's kind of what I've picked up from talking to these different people. Like there's one guy that I was saying, this guy the Blender artist who makes his videos. He was saying that one of his most successful videos on Instagram was like one of his not best pieces. And he's like
Oh yeah.
this is what people like. This is what everyone loves. And I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah.
because of that.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure. I've seen that like, and I've had this conversation with multiple people too of like there's no way to know what will get a big reaction and what will get no reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've posted work that I'm like, I put a ton of work into
Yeah.
this. I polished it to no end. I did like a video turn thing and a pan and I put music to it and really tried to
Yeah.
sell this thing. And then I remember there was some city kind of themed thing to a week when we were doing Pixelogic Live at one stage of mixing two I think it was mixing two IPs or something like that. And so I did Buzz Lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
It was a silly idea of it's Buzz Lightyear but in Star Wars. it was just a bust. It was a just a screenshot of
Yeah.
ZBrush. It took me maybe, I don't know, 2 3 hours max, and I think it got like somewhere between 12 and 15,000 likes, which is way more than all the other stuff I posted on Instagram at that time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm like, is it people just love Buzz Lightyear? Maybe
Yeah.
I couldn't make sense of it. But actually, one theory I had was really weirdly literally the following day, and people were writing to me on Instagram. It was really funny. The following day, Pixar announced the Lightyear
Oh, that's
movie.
funny.
Like right after that, and people were messaging me like they stole your idea and stuff. Um, so I don't know if that could have been I just hit a trend there maybe when
Yeah.
the movie was
No, it's
announced, but
trying to like I don't know, trying to figure out like the algorithm. On the one
yeah,
hand, it's kind of like this like black magic, you know.
yeah,
But at the same time, there's this great line that I've heard from a number of like Mr. Beast. And I've heard him in like in a lot of interviews and a
yes,
lot of these big YouTubers, and they say the algorithm is just people, right? As in like the algorithm
yeah,
is your audience, you know. So it's like instead of saying what does the algorithm want to say, what does the algorithm want to see, say what does my audience want to see. Yeah, that's
yeah,
really, and if you give the people what they want to see, then they'll come back for more. It's really,
yes,
yeah, that's
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like I think something that's overlooked. I think we sometimes get so focused on like I need to crack the code of like what's gonna
yeah,
what's gonna make the algorithm push it out. But I think that's kind of the wrong approach in a lot of ways.
yeah, yeah. I guess there's because uh, the difference the it depends on what you want to get out of it, right? Like you said, like are you just posting your work because you want company to see it and maybe contact you for a job, or are you trying to make content for an audience and make your own brand and stuff like that, which is obviously a very different beast. Like you
Yeah.
said, like there's real work involved in there, interacting with your audience and so on. And there's this, I think many artists are almost trying to tread somewhere in the middle of like they're not necessarily trying to monetize their content on YouTube and stuff like that, but it's more like they're trying to increase the number of eyes on their work
Mm-hmm.
so that more opportunities come their
Right.
way. You know what I mean? And I feel like at one stage, like I remember back in the day when you were well, I say back in the day, I swear I was talking about 40 years ago, but like I mean, you know, maybe 6 to 8 years ago, uh, you would post on Facebook and you
Mm-hmm.
would post on like 10,000 hours Facebook page.
Yeah.
And when you posted that, there was a whole process. You had to be like, right, I've got it in ArtStation, I've got it on Instagram, wherever else I want it, and then I post it here, and then I point the link to
Yeah.
like my
Yeah.
ArtStation stuff. If you want to see that everyone said the same thing, if you want to see the high res images,
Yeah.
go here and link their ArtStation. And it was just, every post was the same,
Yeah.
and that's how you got an audience. That's where because people weren't just scrolling through ArtStation so much,
Right.
where they were scrolling through Facebook, and obviously that's not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
And these things shift, like where the audiences are they using these platforms, are they not, like that can shift and so on. But maybe it is just the case that now that middle ground is maybe gone because the content creator has become a bigger thing
Mm-hmm.
over the years, and that's what, when people interact with content, that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for just that middle ground kind of
Right.
thing, because there's so much
Right, I was gonna say you can't like
stronger
really
content.
if you put your foot if you have like if you straddle the fence on both sides,
Yeah,
you're not really getting either one.
exactly.
You either got to put all your focus, again, this is just what works right now and it could change in 5 years or less,
Yeah,
but like either you put your focus on solely targeting um studios, right, and just like here's my art station, and then maybe you focus on LinkedIn, or you say I'm really gonna focus on building an audience. And I think building the audience is a better approach, because first of all, when you build that audience, they'll kind of follow you wherever you go. Like they because they fall in love with you as a person and your work. And then through your audience, a lot of times that will lead to a studio noticing you because maybe somebody who works at the studio is part of that audience. And next thing you know, it gets passed to the chain of command. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's somebody high up at the company, whatever it is, but I personally am getting more and more of the mindset that like the second is the better approach for today's market. That's just from what I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I from what I've seen, I would gather, yeah, I would come
Yeah.
to the same conclusion. I still like you have your, I don't know, Gabriel Suarez, or, as far as I can tell, he just posts an odd picture when he's out for the day
Yeah.
and posts his artwork.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many followers he has now, a couple of 100,000,
Yeah.
insane amount.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm always like, how are you doing that? What are you doing? Because you're not doing YouTube videos or Discord servers or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not to say his work is great. So I mean,
Right.
that maybe that's enough. That
Right.
its work is so good that it just speaks for itself, and that's enough.
No,
Um,
I think it's also it's that kind of like it's that authenticity, it's the engagement, again it is work. It's a constant
for sure.
because if you're not constantly putting stuff out there, then you'll very quickly get buried under everyone else who is. And next thing you
Yes.
know, even if I follow you, but if you and I are not actively engaging with each other on a regular basis, all of a sudden your story, instead of being one of the first five that I see, it'll be after 30,
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
which point I've
Yeah.
already kind of closed my phone.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
that's I
Yeah.
think I really do think that's kind of like again, it's just from what I've gathered. I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a social media marketer, but
No. No. Of course. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's probably a transition to, because every if you're gonna post regularly, like you said, maybe it's like uh, your opinion on
yeah,
process, or because you can't, if you're gonna post regularly, you can't always be posting this
right,
massively polished, fully
right,
textured, fully rendered thing every time, because you can't do that
yeah, yeah.
like every week,
But again,
you know.
that's what people are looking for necessarily. That's my
Exactly.
point. Is that people are
Yeah.
looking. People want to see the process. People want to see
Yeah.
again. They want to see the person. That was a big thing for me in starting this podcast. Is like show people the person behind the portfolio. Like
Yeah.
because like ultimately like these people that we like their work, they're people too. Like it's not like this artwork doesn't make itself.
Yeah.
And it's like that was a big thing about doing this podcast is to like get to know the people who are doing the work that I love. Like when I find people who I like their work, I reach out to them. I'm like, hey, I would love your work. I love to talk to you. And it's
Yeah.
been a great experience. I got to meet really cool people, and it's been a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I'd imagine.
yeah.
I wonder, has that changed to this, which is nice. But my memory of artists that I really liked, 10 plus years ago, it almost didn't feel like they were just people. It felt like they were like this
Untouchable.
untouchable
Yeah,
thing. You know what I mean?
yeah.
That maybe, and some still do. Some still feel, because they don't post online
Mm-hmm.
much, and they never do like interviewee type things, or they
Yeah,
don't, but they're just so well established at this stage that they're still, they're up there in high regard to many, many people.
yeah.
Um, like like to me, I've always been a massive fan of an artist called James W. Kane,
Mm-hmm.
another sculptor, and he has many, 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 many examples of like work that's just on another level for me. And it, I say that, and yet my work doesn't look like his work. Like, it's not like his style and stuff is quite
Mm-hmm.
different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he still was an influence, I feel like. I think longer than I've used ZBrush, I've been a massive fan of his work. But he he'll post stuff. He'll do a sculpt and he'll post it. But you don't see him do a lot of I would say you don't really see
The
the
person.
person behind that work so much. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Compared to many other artists, where
Yeah.
it's really on the forefront of what they do. It's almost the primary thing in many cases,
Yeah.
and then the art is almost second.
Yeah.
Um, and I with that, there's still that, like, that still feels like that untouchable,
Yeah.
in that untouchable
Yeah,
space
but
to
again,
me.
I think this like it all circles back. I think to we talked about a bunch in this conversation. This idea about like the triple A's moving out of the way for the double A's. I think the same thing's happening
Yeah,
with artists. Like that kind of mentality of the untouchables is kind of being phased out for these people who are maybe not as polished and not as perfect, but are again like in the trenches with the people and like
yeah,
actively engaged. Because again, people prefer that connection.
yeah,
Like, and I think that's like that's more and more you're seeing that as kind of being what's trending, and those being the artists who are really like not just making careers out of their work, but having consistent flow of revenue because again they
yes,
have people who are just who love their work and love them as a person and like want to support them, and so all of a sudden they're like living very comfortably because they just have built such a wonderful. And look at Shane Olsen, for example.
yeah,
His whole thing is teaching, and he's built this tremendous community of students who love him,
yeah,
and he's been able to support himself just off teaching for his a huge chunk
yeah,
of his career.
absolutely. Yeah, I have a lot of time for Shane and the work that he's put into that. And it's very admirable too, because so many people have there's so many artists. There's almost a generation of artists that have just come from the back of Shane
Mm-hmm.
Olsen's work.
A
You
hundred
know what I mean?
percent.
So many people went through his school
You could like tell when somebody's a Shane Olsen
oh, big
student.
time. Yeah, big time. And have so many people will have come out of the other end of that, that maybe would have never been ended up being a 3D character artist, and now
Yeah.
they are,
Yeah.
because that's how big that became.
Yeah.
I never asked him. I'd love to know, like, did you see this come? Like, you couldn't have seen that coming. I
Yeah.
feel like nobody sees that level of success coming.
Yeah,
A
yeah. He did
real,
it
a real
before a
solid.
lot of people. Like, he was one of the first, I think,
Yeah.
and he did it. Not, I don't even think that was necessarily his intention. He was just looking to teach people, and
Yes.
through that he built a thriving community.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Shane Olsen Empire.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I'm like working in different companies throughout the years, and I'd often come across somebody like, "Oh, I'm doing a class that is putting out another video." I'm like, "What is that?" And you're like, "Oh, the character workshop thing." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh, yeah, yeah." It just would pop up. I'm like, "Who isn't in this thing?"
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's and it's great. There's something really, because he's so lovely to talk to,
Hmm.
and
So approachable.
yeah, just such a genuinely nice guy,
Yeah.
that you're like, if it goes back to what you said about personality. Like, it's not about the success he's had. It's that makes it's just to see such a nice guy
Hmm.
have done that,
Yeah.
makes it such a, I don't know,
Yeah.
just
A
makes you
hundred
happy
percent.
to, yeah,
Yeah.
there is legend.
We should wrap this up. It's already almost 2 hours, but
Oh, nice. Yeah,
one last question. Just to end off, I asked everybody this
go for it.
question. So, and that is, how do you define success?
Oh, God. Ah, okay. How do I? There's so many philosophical answers for this, that that's a meaty question. How do I define success? Um, if you if you are, I guess, at a base level, if you are content with your life on the whole, then you're successful. And anything more than that is great success. It's just adding to it. It's a bonus at that point. If you're content with your life, I don't think success. I don't necessarily relate success to work. I think it's just a state of being. So if you are content with your life, then you're successful.
Very nice. Where can everybody find you online? All your socials and
Yeah, Instagram, YouTube, ArtStation, the usual. All I wonder, can I send you the links?
yeah, absolutely. We can
Would
put
that be
links in the
easier? Or
description.
the link tree is another option.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could be easier for people if they want to go find me.
Amazing.
But yeah,
Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it.
and thank you. Yeah,
It was
it was a
really
great
nice to
chat.
meet you.
Really happy we did this. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, and you too. You too.
Be well.
All right. Cheers, man.